Hey everyone, we're here in the live stream. See if everyone can hear us. Looks like we got a couple people in the chat. Good to see everyone. Gonna get started here in just a second. Looks like Ben got a blizzard. I'm not sure where you're located, Ben, but we've actually been kind of screwed this winter in terms of just not getting any actual winter. So for living in a desert here in Utah, I'm sure this next summer is going to suck because I think we've only had two snowstorms of any kind, and like they were actually not that big of storms, only a couple inches. So we definitely haven't had the blizzard type things. And personally, as one that loves the cold weather and loves snow, I felt kind of screwed this year. Tomorrow it's going to be 60 degrees here in Utah. It's supposed to be 60 degrees, which is ridiculous for February. So yeah.
Usually we're pretty warm in November and December, but then we get into like the new year in January and February just socks us in the gut.
Yeah.
And then for some reason Utah decides to snow into April and May sometimes, so it's just like
so usually this is like the bone chilling cold where you're just like sick of it all and ready to just move south for the winter. But this year we haven't even had it. In fact, a few times in January I kept thinking to myself, well, after Christmas, and I'm like, wait, Christmas has already happened, but the weather just hasn't been going with our normal time of year, so getting confusing. Oh, Ann Arbor. I might get a foot today. Yeah.
Oh, good Lord.
I was going to say, here in the Salt Lake Valley, I don't know if we've had a foot all year.
I think we got like 4 or 5 inches at most.
Yeah. All right. So we're here on the live stream. Glad got some people in there. Got you guys a little bit more of a heads up than usual. But yeah, we'll get started here, and we're going into just a normal roundtable. But as we've teased before, we're actually going to be talking some comics as on the tail end of the show. So we're going to go through a few news stories. If you guys follow any Dark Tower news, you probably know some of the things. But
I still don't. I've still kept my head in the sand for you guys.
But yeah, so let's go ahead and hit the intro and get started with the show.
The Dark Tower by Stephen King. The man in black fled across the desert, and the gunslinger followed. Go then. There are other worlds than these. Death, but not for you, gunslinger. It's time we had our own palaver, I think, and it's going to take a while.
And yet, dauntless, the slug horn to my lips I set, and blew. Child Roland to the Dark Tower came.
We are quartet, one from many. The palaver begin.
Hello and welcome to Dark Tower Palaver. This is our podcast covering Stephen King's Magnum Opus, The Dark Tower series. My name is Tad.
And I'm Peter.
And we're here for roundtable number 51. Here we are, middle of February?
Mm-hmm.
We were just saying before we hit the normal record to the live stream that it's unseasonably warm here in Utah, so it definitely doesn't feel like February. But we're here for just a roundtable. We have a couple things of news to cover, and then also the big thing on the docket today is talking some comic books.
Gunslinger Born.
Yep, we're so for me, I've actually got the first issue back when it originally came out in 2007, and didn't really have the best kind of job in terms of finances, and honestly, just couldn't keep up with it in terms of buying the issues weekly and stuff. So I ended up falling behind and just honestly just kind of gave up on it. Knew I'd circle back around to it at some point. And I think I've gone through this first series, but never beyond that. So as we go in doing these comics down the way here as just small snippets, not necessarily full on book clubs, but aspects of a roundtable discussion. Mm-hmm. It'll be new for me as we get into the later things, but for Peter, it's the first time.
First time I've ever opened this comic book. I actually bought it 2-3 months ago. I got a credit for buying one of my I got Batman comic collection. I bought a Batman comic and it said, well, here's a $5 credit, and the Gunslinger Born was on sale for $4.99 at the time. So I ended up paying 15 cents, and I got every issue for the Gunslinger Born. So
so like a digital omnibus for that run, or I guess I can't remember. There's actually a different name for it. I can't remember if it's trade paperback or I apologize. I'm like, when it comes to some of the parlance for comics, I'm just one that reads them. But yeah, we're gonna hit into those because I guess if you're just joining us for the first time, roundtables, we kind of cover all sorts of things. But what we decided is this year we wanted to mix it up a little bit and add some things in, because there's some stuff that we wanted to talk about. At one point we were talking about the comics even being part of our book club series, but like honestly, as slow as the book clubs go, because we're kind of going in depth with them, it would probably be, a decade from now before we ever got to the end of the series, let alone into the comics.
Well, so, also, if we did book clubs, I mean, that's not 7 books, that's 8, potentially 9 books, given how long it's taking us. And Stephen King's kind of hinted at a new book coming out for the Dark Tower. I mean, yeah, it'd be a while before we even got to the comics.
Yeah, so we kind of decided what we do is do some some fun little roundtable side things as we talk about the comics. We've talked about doing Went Through the Keyhole as well, and just kind of having like just some, like, I guess almost a corner of the round table, as it were, just be dedicated to some of these things that we want to talk about. And heck, we may even at some point start delving into some of the non Dark Tower connections in Stephen King. We've talked about that too, but yeah, it just feels like that'd be kind of a cool way to mix up and get some of the other stuff mixed in without necessarily waiting on book clubs to run their course, because we've taken a couple of years now to get into what
we're definitely taking a roll-in stance to book clubs. We're plodding along, but we're doing it right. I feel we're doing the books justice by going the route we're going, which is why we decided to go this route with the comics, Went Through the Keyhole, and like Tad said, anything that's connected to Dark Tower that we want to go into. I know one of the ones that's come up a lot is Sisters of Eliza. We've talked about that one. And then what was the other main one that we talked about with Flag? I'm spacing on the name of it right now.
Yeah, now just because you put me on the spot, I'm blanking on it too. It's the fairy tale.
Yeah, it's like Roland's a king and he gets killed or something like that.
Yeah. Sorry, I was like right in the middle of. I was just gonna look up a tweet because someone tweeted something about the talisman that he wanted me to bring up to you, and I just I just barely remembered it like this very moment. I didn't even think about it while we were prepping, so I was Eye
of the Dragon. Yeah. Eyes of the Dragon.
I really wish I would have thought about this tweet because somebody mentioned something about. Let's see. Let me see if I can find it. Yeah.
What is that? Eloria? Is that, I'm saying it wrong? Eloria? Is that how it's pronounced? That's how you say it? Eloria?
Oh yeah, I'm sure we butcher. I think I butcher that one different every time I read it or talk about it here. Just kind of going back through the tweets here. But yeah, Peter, go ahead and talk a little bit about maybe even your comic experience, because I remember when these first came out, I didn't even necessarily point you towards them because I don't think you'd ever touched a comic book before.
Yeah,
and comics are a different art form. I mean, this is a little bit of a preview because we want to jump back to some news and the intros.
Yeah, I was going to say we need to do our intros first.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Well, I guess we could say, well, I'm looking for this tweet. At least the spoiler alerts. If you haven't finished reading the series, you may want to not listen to this show and stick to our book club episodes, because we will spoil freely from the 7 primary books, side books, comic books, movie, whatever there might be. We may spoil from it in this episode. So, just hold off on listening to this if you haven't finished the series. But go ahead and give a little bit of background on your...
my comic book history?
Yeah.
Okay, so my comic book history is basically non-existent until Christmas of last year. That's Christmas of 2016, not 17, sorry. For... the year of 2016, I was delving really deep into the mythology and the history of Batman, and Tad found out and was nice enough to give me a couple comics for Christmas saying, hey, I heard you wanted to get into comics and Batman was your starting point. He got me 3 of the quintessential must-have for comic book fans that are the Batman comic book fans. I read them. I fell in love. I've been collecting Batman comics ever since. My collection's up to I got 16 or 17 now. I don't have a subscription yet or anything like that. But The Dark Tower is actually just my second comic that I'll be reading, aside from any of the Batman ones. So, aside from that, I read some of The Dark Tower, The Gunslinger Born last night, and it's fantastic. I'm really excited to talk about it today.
Yeah, I am not having any luck on this tweet. I actually threw out a question on the Twitter a while back about just people's favorite moments of the book. Or I think I said, no, not necessarily favorite moments. It was more like emotional moments, be it happy, sad, excited,
I saw
fearful,
that.
whatever it might be. And I've got
You threw it up on Facebook too, didn't you?
Yeah, I've got a lot of responses to that. I'm going to have to come back to that question on that. And I haven't read Talisman either, so
okay.
I don't know. I didn't know necessarily how the conversation would go, but there was someone that postulated a question. I'll throw that at you next at our next roundtable because I'll have to go back through and find it. I completely forgot until, of course, as we start recording, because that's Murphy's Law.
That's how you roll.
Indeed,
that's Tad's Law right there. Expect Tad to forget.
So now we're going to go through the rest of the intros real quick. If you guys want to find us, you can do that on iTunes. You can stream us on Stitcher. You can find us on any podcast services. If you want to subscribe and rate and review our show, you can do that through any of those services. Most podcast services, you basically subscribe, I guess, to listen at all. But yeah, if there's any place to review, we would definitely appreciate that. iTunes being one of the biggest. Show notes, you can find that in the area for the podcast description. It's still a temporary URL because we're under construction for the normal one. So check your little podcast area with the description and you'll see the URL to go to our show notes. We have a few articles to cover. And also if you want to join us in Palaver, be it through our live stream, as we have people now in the live stream, or whether you want to engage us in other ways, Peter can tell you the best way to do that because you are part of our quartet and we want you to be part of it and join in the Palavers.
Best way to join in the Palavers is to email us directly. It's darktowerpalaver@gmail.com. You can also find us on Facebook. It's facebook.com/darktowerpalaver. And then like Tad was saying earlier, you can tweet at us. It's @darktowerpod. That's @darktowerpod. We stream our live shows on YouTube. We also have other shows on there as well. Unfortunately, you still won't find any of our book clubs on YouTube. With the audio clips that we do with them, they get taken down every time we try to put one up. So look for our roundtables on YouTube. That's youtube.com/darktowerpalaver.
Yeah, and then anything when it comes to the book clubs, those will generally be found in your normal route for podcasts, your podcast services, Stitcher, that kind of thing. I am looking into Spotify. Someone hit me up on that and let me know. I still haven't done the legwork on that to figure it out. I know they're.
You said it was more extensive than the other podcast services.
Yeah,
right?
They're a little bit more choosy on things. They have like a whole list of things that you have to kind of hit like on the check boxes to be accepted there. So we'll see what happens with that for sure.
They're elitist on the podcast service, huh?
Yeah, a little bit. I don't, which is kind of strange versus everyone else. It's just like basically, unless you're saying some really horrendous stuff, you're pretty much going to get onto iTunes or anywhere else. So kind of strange. All right, so let's go ahead and jump into some news real quick. Then we'll backtrack into some comic talk because there has been some news, and in fact, one of them. I mean, none of it's like massive, but some of it is potentially bigger stuff.
I gotta say, before we start, it kind of surprised me. We were talking about our show prep and everything like that the other day, and you're like, "Yeah, we're gonna start with some news." And I was like, I got thinking about it like that night, and then yesterday, I was like, "What news could we possibly have?" like. Yeah. So I'm very interested. I was very tempted to go look, though.
Yeah, there's a little bit. I mean, some of it is, I don't know. I mean, one of them's even just kind of like a funny little thing. But then there's even some stuff that I left on the cutting room floor to leave more time for comic talk. But yeah, I did want to talk about just a few things for sure. And then get into comics. And I feel like as we were talking about like doing comics and different things, we figured they'd be part of roundtables. So I'm like, well, as part of roundtables, we probably still want to do like news and that kind of stuff, especially because with the book clubs are not doing that. So like one of these dropped, I want to say it was like the day of or day before one of our previous recordings, but we were doing a book club. So I'm like, I can't mention it. I can't mention it. So let's go ahead and jump into these real quick. And this one is a potential big one, but it is one that we only have a I'm trying to think of the nicest way to say this, a unproven source, as well as one that is very minimal on what they're actually saying. So this isn't going to be a lot of this isn't going to be like an in-depth thing. Literally, I have one bite from this article. But the title of the article is "The Dark Tower TV series to start filming this summer in Ireland and in England."
Ooh.
So that's kind of interesting how I don't know, I mean it was kind of, but then like when I read it's by Caleb Williams from Omega Underground, and I was kind of disappointed to see that name versus like, you know, Variety or EW or, you know, maybe some of these ones a little bit more
the ones that we normally see when something starts filming. You see Anthony Bresnikan going out to South Africa with the film or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, this is one that I'm not even necessarily saying that they're not to be trusted. I'm just saying that they're not one I'm familiar with, so I'm taking it with a little bit of a grain of salt. But this is what Caleb writes. He basically gives like a paragraph that runs down where we've been previous with the film and everything else, and then he gets into this tail end here. I think it's only a couple paragraphs long, but this one paragraph is the one I wanted to share because this is what he's saying. And he says, now we at Omega Underground have learned, so again, this is them basically being the primary source, so they're not referring to a bigger news outlet. They're saying that they got this information. Have learned that production is expected to begin sometime in the summer in both Ireland and the United Kingdom. For obvious reasons, expect a brand new cast for the proposed series. It should also be noted that no network has yet to pick up the project. And that actually goes right along with what we had heard some talk that MRC and the people behind the film were going to do the TV series, potentially film even some episodes without having a network attached.
Yeah.
And I mean, I remember I even like speculated that potentially like with Ron Howard and his company having so much connection to Netflix, that it might have an easier time maybe selling to Netflix or something like that.
Well, we also mentioned recently Netflix has been picking up a lot of Stephen King exclusives as well. I mean, I know Hulu has Castle Rock and 11/22/63, but at the same time, 1922 and Gerald's Game just dropped on Netflix this past year.
Yeah, and then you got like Castle Rock was a big one on the Super Bowl with their trailer and stuff. So like there
was an actual trailer?
Yeah.
Oh, dude, I totally missed it.
I think it was before the game too.
Oh, I didn't get to the game. Like I got to the games, like said hi to everybody, sat down, and kickoff happened. So I totally missed it.
Because I want to say the solo teaser was before the game too. I was actually surprised with the.
Although the solo teaser was during the first quarter.
There was another big one that was before the game.
Oh, really?
But, yeah, kind of weird. But yeah, so there's a lot of Stephen King stuff going on. But basically, it is different from the way things would normally be produced. Generally speaking, you would have like a network would pick up a show based on the idea or based on maybe whatever they would at least foot the bill for like a pilot, and then from there decide whether they wanted to pick up the show.
Yeah.
So it would be not necessarily completely unheard of, but it would definitely be the road less traveled to have the show actually go into production and have Ron Howard and the people involved with MRC and everything else foot the bill to shoot the film and all that kind of stuff, or shoot the series.
Yeah.
And you know, or at least a small part of it, and then sell it. That's a different way than is usual. Mm-hmm. But I don't know.
Ron Howard and Dark Tower are a different breed. I'm okay with it.
Yeah. So that'll be interesting. It'll be interesting to see what happens as the summer approaches. We will potentially see more talk, hopefully from bigger news people, as we have because like obviously castings would have to come first before they get out there to film. So I would imagine that we'd be seeing some bigger news places pick up like casting calls and stuff like that, casting announcements and stuff, and then eventually see to where it's like, oh, so and so is, you know, heading to Ireland to film Dark Tower. I don't know. So we'll see.
I wonder what this is. This news article with they're heading to Ireland and England. I wonder if this is them getting like permits, and someone leaked it that they're getting the permits to go film in certain areas and stuff like that. Because I imagine that you're looking at Ireland and England. I'm looking at Magus.
Yeah, or
that's what I'm thinking of.
Or Gilead. I think
I don't know. I mean, rolling hills, horses. I mean, that sounds like Ireland and England to me.
Yeah,
so
I think it definitely fit. I mean, they're both in the same general region of whatever. Because in the larger scale, the map of Midworld,
right?
They're in the closer area, so they wouldn't necessarily look too terribly different from each other. But
this goes back to, didn't Dark Tower have this happen to them, where their shooting schedule got released in New York, that they had bought permits to film there or something like that? Someone had released that and we had heard about it.
Yeah. I think
that's kind of what I'm wondering, if that's what this is.
Possibly. I feel like this is still too early in the game for that. This is probably more, if this is any kind of leak, it's probably from some kind of scout doing location scouting more than anything. But that's just my guess. It feels like it's still kind of early to even be getting permits and stuff. Again, without any castings being done and stuff like that. It's kind of interesting. And then I would just want to backtrack here. Chris in the chat asked about Unfound Door episodes. Yeah, I've actually just kind of I just haven't been reading as much recently. It's been been a little bit more slow on that side of things. Life's been keeping me kind of busy. So the Unfound Door episodes, though, as soon as I just need to record one basically for The Shining, because I've finished that now. But I haven't done that.
I thought you did a Shining one.
Did I already do? I thought I didn't.
You did do the Shining one. It's on the YouTube. I was just looking at it.
Oh, okay. I guess I did do that one then. I'm sorry. I thought I hadn't done that one yet. All right.
Oh no. Shining you do need to do. It's Salem's Lot that you did.
Yeah, Salem's Lot. I remember doing that one. Okay, so yeah, The Shining's up next. I just have to do just have to sit down and record it basically. But yeah, it's one of those things like recently with the 4-10 schedule, I get a 3-day weekend, but it feels like it goes by in like like maybe 3/4 of a day. It just feels like my weekends fill up so quick, and it's just been tough to get the time, but I'm definitely not lost on that project. It's just something that I need to sit down and do for sure. And
well, you're I don't know, I think you've alliterated this to a couple times before. You're also working on a new podcast with another host.
Yeah.
So I mean, Ted's got stuff going on. So
yeah, for sure. And I mean, I'm an unabashed movie fan. This year is the time of year where a lot of movies are to be seen for like the Oscars and stuff like that. And so I will admit some of that stuff's been going on with me with just hitting theaters and like
there was a couple movies that came back to theaters this past weekend.
There's been a bunch of them. Most of the
Dunkirk came back, right?
Yeah. So like I've been seeing some movies too. So like I guess like that kind of stuff has also been filling up. But yeah, I'm definitely gonna do it. I just want to get all my notes together for The Shining. I'm actually considering watching both adaptations as well before. But obviously there's been some news on the front of The Shining universe as well with Dr. Sleep movie being signed.
Oh yeah.
So with the guy that did I'm blanking. He did the Netflix one.
Gerald's Game.
Yes, Gerald's Game, not 1922.
No, the guy that did Gerald's Game, which is the and I know Ted hasn't read it yet, so I don't want to give any spoilers or anything like that. It is a definite psychological one, which Dr. Sleep portrays really well with I just spaced on his name. I wanted to say the kid. What's his name?
What, Danny?
Danny. With Danny going through all his struggles and everything like that in Dr. Sleep, it's going to be fantastic to see him take that character and see what he can do with it.
Yeah. I'm just kind of looking at the chat here. Magnus in the chat said, I had a vision how cool it'd be to see the 9th book in 2019. I think we could all agree with that. And then also talked about the clip of him saying maybe. I recall the sound clip that we played. It seemed a little bit more definitive than a maybe.
Yeah, that's what I was.
I feel like it's more of a when than an if.
Exactly.
So I feel like we are going to get another book, so it'll be interesting to see. So sorry, just trying to keep up on the chat as well. But so the Unfound Doors, those are definitely still coming. But yeah, there's definitely a ton going on. But yeah, I'll try to get that. Maybe I'll even look at it doing it next week. So maybe if anyone has any thoughts on The Shining, be it the book or any of the movies or TV series, throw out some emails towards the email address at darktowerpalaver@gmail.com.
Yep.
And be part of that conversation. Might even record it live. That it does terrify me a little bit to record live on my own. That would be an interesting thing. But yeah, definitely want to have that conversation for sure. It's definitely one of my favorite books, and it's actually the very first Stephen King book I ever picked up as well.
All right. Well, I gave my comic history. What about yours?
And so me, I grew up in the 90s, not necessarily the best time for comic books on paper. There was a lot of bad stuff going on. Not necessarily like, I mean, there were some bigger events like Death of Superman and stuff, but there was a lot of like just weird reinventions and things were just kind of feeling so. But I actually grew up with my stepdad was a huge comic fan in like the 70s, and he actually I basically read a lot of his stuff secondhand. So a lot of the stuff that was coming out in the 70s, I'm pretty much a Marvel guy. Grew up reading things like Fantastic Four, Captain America, Hulk, stuff like that. A lot of the stuff that is now the MCU, as a matter of fact. I grew up, reading those. Then in the 90s, the big thing for me was not only reading those, but concurrently I was watching the 1960s, I think it was, Spider-Man cartoon. I watched that on TV, as well as, of course, the X-Men cartoon. Probably one of the better adaptations in terms of just taking basically just straight comic stuff and putting it on screen. I remember that being one of the highlights of my Saturday mornings. And then so that's kind of my background, is just reading a lot of Marvel and stuff. So that's kind of me. I have never got as much into DC. I love Superman. Superman, the 1978 film, is probably one of my all-time favorite comic book movies. So if I do get into DC, I am one of those people that will say Superman over Batman every day of the week. So that's kind of my background on comics. So now let's go on over to another news article real quick. I am actually going to... just so we can make sure. Yeah, let's do this one. So this one is from a more of a local paper. And the article is a local mom writes a book to get kids reading again. And it's basically an article. It'll be in the show notes if you want to read the whole thing. But basically, she wrote a book that's supposed to appeal to kids that are more into like screen time and stuff than books. Mostly reading for pleasure type stuff. Like her concern is, I'm sure most parents agree, that kids are so much more into screens and stuff like that you don't see kids actively trying to read for fun. And this article has some cool stuff that made me kind of like fist bump a little bit of stuff I agree with, where she says things like, don't force like your likes or wants on your kids. Let them pick what they want to read. Don't censor them. Like things like that. Like, don't be concerned about things they might want to read. Just let them read the stuff, which I liked. I didn't necessarily get into that for the notes, but the things I have here, she said, this article says, part and parcel with the idea of the concept of a book series, Newton found that getting kids to read book series like Harry Potter or The Hunger Games can put in motion a self-sustaining reading habit. And then she says, the nice thing about the series is that once a kid is into the series, that could last them up to 4 or 5 months, Newton said. Series offer readers the chance to get even more deeply involved with the lives of the characters. That relationship between reader and character can be the key part of making reading fun and interesting for your young readers. Then it goes on here. To use one more example, Newton also emphasized that the parents should be open to letting their kids find books that appeal to them due to those books' relationship with other media. As an example, Newton highlighted her son's latest reading adventure. Her son is a big fan of the Netflix series Stranger Things. He came to find out that the show creators are big fans of Stephen King, and as a result, her son just started the King's massive Dark Tower series.
All right.
So I was like, oh, that's kind of an interesting, roundabout way to come to the Dark Tower series. I felt like if nothing else, it'd be interesting to just bring that up for that matter, man.
Yeah, thinking about kids, because watching Netflix and stuff like that, and that leads them to the Dark Tower.
Yeah.
That's interesting to think about that, because none of our fans has come to the Dark Tower series via Netflix or finding out that the Stephen King is Stranger Things is largely based, influenced by Stephen King, I should say, not based on. That's really cool.
Yeah, I found it a very unique way to come to it. They don't really give an indication how old this kid is, so I don't really know. I wouldn't say I'd ever be concerned, but I'd be interested with how young or old the kid is, how the series.
There's a lot in that series.
Him.
Yeah.
But it was funny because over the last couple of years of doing the podcast, we talked about it looks like Chris is taking off. Chris, good to have you, and thanks for joining us for the short time. It's always great to have you in the live chats.
See you, Chris.
But it was just interesting because like we talked about for years now about how the movie would bring new readers,
right?
And even now, as we're about to look at some comics, the comics no doubt would have pushed people towards reading the series as well prior to the movie. But so for this, it's interesting because I've never really thought about the concept of something like Stranger Things, which is obviously a huge hit, to have that actually inspire people to come to King, let alone to the Dark Tower series. So that's really cool. And then the last thing here is a quote that says, the reason he gave it a shot wasn't because I recommended it, but because the people who created Stranger Things were raving about Stephen King, Newton said. So I just found that was just a small little thing I wanted to share because I thought it was kind of cool. And it's definitely a fun thing. And of course, Stranger Things is amazing. So one more reason for it to be amazing is, it's leading people to the Dark Tower series. And that is always a good thing, in my opinion. And then next up is one, and this is a list, but we're only going to go through one, and it's top 5 novels that deserve a video game adaptation.
All right.
I wonder why we're covering this.
I wonder why.
And this is by Katie Green from The Independent on February 3rd, 2018. I never heard of The Independent before, but I looked at it and it said something about Utah. I'm like, Utah? It's a St. George publication.
Oh, really?
Yeah, which is the other side of Utah. It's down in the southern portion, and the joke generally is that most people in Salt Lake area don't consider St. George even part of Utah.
Nah.
We tend to forget it quite a bit.
Well, it's what, 2.5 hours away?
Yeah, it's just a funny cultural difference. But
the big thing is that where Salt Lake is located, if you go 2.5 hours north, east, or west, you're out of the state.
Yeah.
But if you go 2.5 hours south, all of a sudden you're in St. George, which is basically out of the state.
Okay, so this is a few of the notes I have from her. She says, Katie says, the Dark Tower series is filled with not just the superb character development the King is known for, but an incredibly gripping storyline with plenty of time and alternative universe travel that connects so much of his other works. Play as Roland Deschain, pursuing Walter O'Dim / Randall Flagg across the desert in the opening level. Blow monstrosities to smithereens with your sandalwood revolvers, and shoot satellites.
Yes. I did not know that I needed this, but I do.
The great thing is that early on there, you'd end up going from a 2-gunner to a 1-gunner.
Aww.
Then she goes on and says that, and shoot the satellite dish off the top of Shardic's monstrous head, protect the village of Colibrim Sturgis from the wolves of the Thunderclap invasion. There are so many awesome action scenes at this book that even a 14-hour game length, considered relatively short by today's standards, would do the source material a fair bit of justice. And then she says, bonus points if we get an online multiplayer shooter mode with other players taking the roles of Eddie, Susanna, and Jake. Another option I'd love to see is a sandbox style game based on this story, even a simple browser multiplayer type game like Serve.io, but with the characters' names and locations. And I would say, boo on the multiplayer thing. I would say rope in the others of the quartet as part of the same storyline.
Yeah.
Have it where you're going between different things. I mean, as I think of the story, if you added in not just when they're together, but also think about times where they're on their own. And
especially like book 6 or 7. I always get it mixed up.
Yeah.
Book 6 where they go to the wrong place. Eddie and Roland were supposed to go after Susanna, and Jake and Callahan were supposed to go to Maine, and then they ended up getting switched.
Yeah.
Just think about Eddie and Roland blasting through Maine.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, or you have the Dixie Pig. You have...
that leads up to the perfect confrontation of the Dixie Pig.
Yeah.
Jake running in the underneath tunnels trying to get up by, monstrous Triceratops and everything like that.
Yeah. And you can always do a button masher to get away from Dandelo. You have to button mash to stop from laughing. That might be one way to do it.
I like Chris's statement here. A game based on the Dark Tower, but also in King's entire universe would be like a version of Kingdom Hearts, but for adults.
Yeah, indeed. I definitely think it would be something. Again, it's like one of those like we've been saying for a while now. Is when it comes to the movie, it's just gold in the streets waiting to be picked up for a film, especially if done properly. In terms of like, I feel like if you went like balls to the wall and went, you know what, we're going to do like a huge budget and we're going to guarantee 6, 7, 8 movies and just go for it. You know what I mean? And don't do this whole like trial balloon where you're worrying about, what everyone's going to think, and you just do it and
take off the kid gloves and throw some punches.
Yeah. If you just did that, like, I feel like, it's gold in the streets to be picked up. Just like, I feel like Game of Thrones with the TV series, like,
yeah,
they picked up those books, like that's gold in the streets that was just waiting to be minted into cash, a cash cow for HBO. I still feel the Dark Tower is that way. It's the same thing with video games, is like when it comes to that kind of thing, I feel like that would not only be a huge seller because again it's such a different approach to things. I mean, in general than people are used to. I think it'd be a huge seller. Plus, again, from our selfish perspective, you'd also get more readers coming to the Dark Tower series as they play the games. And then the next one and the last one here before we get into some comic talk is one that just broke recently. It's the biggest Sony franchises that could go out for sale, and this is by Mansoor Mithawala. I don't know how Mithawala. I don't know how you say his name. From Screen Rant on February 5th, which is only a couple days ago. If you're listening live, so beginning of the week, most likely. I think it was. And this is kind of some bigger news that broke, and basically it looks as though, and I'll just read from the story here. Sony Corp is looking into putting Sony Pictures up for sale, thereby selling off their movie and TV division. As one of Hollywood's 6 major studios, Sony Pictures, which includes Columbia Pictures, TriStar Pictures, and Screen Gems, has several blockbuster franchises properties under its belt, both in film and on television. But what franchises does Sony actually own that could be up for grabs? Aside from their big comedy films that they mentioned, like a lot of like your more adult humor type stuff, like the stuff that Seth Rogen's going to be in is Sony. A few others that they mentioned I didn't grab as the notes. But apart from those, Sony has plenty of action-focused franchises in their library: The Karate Kid, The Dark Tower, Sicario, Charlie's Angels, Underworld, not to mention Millennium. And it says that says The Girl in the Spider's Web, and Robert Langdon series, in parentheses, The Da Vinci Code. But one of their biggest action franchises is certainly Men in Black. A spin-off is currently in the works, which may spawn a new series or timeline of its own. And now Jumanji, a new property which a buyer would consider looking at. Obviously one of the bigger movies of the year was into this next year has been Jumanji. And it says, of course, Sony Pictures business properties remain Spider-Man and James Bond. However, those IPs do not belong to Sony, but are contracted through them and would not be bought for any kind of deal. So it looks like that's kind of some big news, especially as we're talking with when it comes to Dark Tower, because if Sony is indeed mothballing Sony Pictures and their stuff's going to be sold, that means that Dark Tower is going to potentially be owned by someone else, whether it's bought wholesale as a company and it's owned by another company, or whether people go through and buy things a la carte and, you know, buy up franchises until there's nothing left. It very well could be that Sony loses that role of, you know, being the studio that owns Dark Tower. So just as we go forward, talking about things like the TV series that is upcoming, and potentially, you know, Idris Elba still saying he wants to do a sequel to the movie. It's interesting to know that potentially Sony will have absolutely nothing to do with it and may potentially be out of the movie business.
All right, Tad, go buy it. Come on.
Yeah, let me go buy a few scratchers and maybe I can, you know. And of course, I'd have to drive a few hours because it's Utah.
Yeah.
as you said, when it comes to driving, a couple hours and being in another state.
Yep.
Okay, so that is it for the news. So now we get on over to some talk about comics. And I just threw up a picture here of one of my favorite images from the comics is the one of the first images we get of Roland that's not shadowed, not obscured, but the first
not his boot.
Yeah, just your first full reveal is this picture here, and this is kind of in the same way of the books. We kind of start with the opening bit of the desert and the opening line, not necessarily to start the comic, but a few panels in. But then you get this, and then after that, you kind of flash back and get to young Roland, and then start going through with this series as it goes through and tells the backstory of Roland. So yeah, I love this image though. It's one of my favorite images of Roland. But let me go ahead and grab my notes here. So as we talk about this, let me go through the tail of the tape first off and talk about... so Gunslinger Born was launched in 2007, and it was published by Marvel Comics. The creative director and executive director is Stephen King. I mean, there's obviously a little bit of question that have come up about how much input he actually had versus is he just putting his name on it. But that's something that we'll probably discuss as time goes by and we get into things that may... you know, may or may not still be in play as quote canon because of potential things with like went through the keyhole and stuff like that. And next up, creative director and executive plotting and consultant by Robin Firth. So Robin is involved in this, and obviously she's done a lot of work on Dark Tower stuff.
I knew that name sounded familiar.
Yeah.
I was looking at that and I was like, Robin, why do I know Robin Firth?
Yeah, she's done a ton, and I think like this is, I mean, I think this comic series is probably one of her magnum opuses in the Dark Tower. I mean, she's done a lot of incredible work with it, and working alongside Stephen King with a lot of stuff. But I feel like this is probably one of her biggest like inputs is a lot of the creative behind some of the comic stuff here. The script is by Peter David, which is a legendary comic dude. He's been around, for a while. I think like probably I would say most likely one of the more famous things he's done is he did a 12-year run on the Incredible Hulk, and a lot of people consider his run kind of what was able to transform the Hulk and make him a little bit more
appealing.
And not necessarily as appealing, but more deep, more. I feel like a lot of even what we've seen in the last couple of movies with him owes a lot to Peter David and his run with the Hulk versus versus being like some of the stuff like the early days and stuff like he's like the more childish and that kind of thing. He started to move him to where like he as Hulk could think a little bit more cognitively, not necessarily to like Professor Hulk yet, but he got him into the more of the realm to where it actually started to become more of a character study. and a little bit less of like the Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde straight up like monster. Like some of the early stuff I've been reading, and it's like it almost feels like a monster movie, and versus like as you get into some of the more deep like character driven stuff is when you get into Peter David stuff. So it's definitely one of those like comic royalties for sure when it comes to stuff that for people to be involved, see his name is pretty cool. And then also
fast. Mark Pearson just asked in the chat. Robin First, she wrote the Dark Tower Concordance, right?
I believe so. Yes. I'm going to check on that because
I think that's where we talked.
There's
about
that,
before.
And there's the guide, and Bev Vincent did. Let's see, Dark Tower Concordance is that one is Robin Firth, and then it was the. I'm blanking on the one that Bev Vincent did, what his is called, but it's he did a book as well that kind of is kind of a good little guide along with you as you go towards that. I guess that could be the argument for Robin Firth is potentially the concordance being a bigger thing. But I would say that'd be a huge debate is concordance versus the input in this comic series. And then last up from the title page with the credit page, it's also illustrated by Jay Lee, which is he's also fairly well known. He's done a lot of cool stuff. Definitely one of those ones that he's gone around and touched a lot of different properties and stuff. I don't know as much about him because I'm a huge Incredible Hulk fan. He's been one of my favorite characters. So Peter David, I'm a little bit more familiar with just right off the bat. Jay Lee, I do know that he's been involved in quite a bit though in the comics. He's definitely another one of those ones that I feel like a lot of this great art is probably a lot to do with Jay Lee.
Ben Grix in the chat said Jay Lee does some nice stuff. He also drew some Namor, I think is how you pronounce it, and Inhumans for Marvel.
Yeah.
So,
his Namor stuff was actually really cool. I do remember that now. And then he also mentions Hulk and Aquaman and Supergirl for Peter David. And then also Mark is saying The Road to the Dark Tower by Bev Vincent. That's the So there's just so much great like supplemental material, and a lot of it comes down to one of the two, Robin or Bev. So and now you get into the comics and see that name is one that it's in good hands if she's involved.
Yeah. Welcome back, Chris. Glad you could be back for a few minutes.
Oh yeah. So now jumping on over into it, we're just going to kind of go through and hit some notes and stuff that we had. So what did you think? Just I guess right off the bat.
The very first thing is the very first like the cover. Did you notice that they put Ka in the title? Look at Born.
Oh yeah.
I love that, dude.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So in the so it's the Stephen King, The Dark Tower at the top. The picture of Roland as an adult, and then it says the gunslinger Born, and in the O in Born it has the Ka symbol, which is fantastic because I don't know if I've said this before. I think I've said this before, but Ka is one of my favorite things to come out of this series. The KA combined with the circle,
the symbol, for sure.
That's one of my favorite things from what you wanted to say.
Just the cover one more time. I just want to make sure that we're okay. Cool, yeah. I was looking at the logo. I was like, I didn't look at the picture, make sure that we're because we have two different. Yours is from Amazon, right?
Yeah,
and then mine's from Google. I just wanted to make sure because one difference we found is yours divvies it up by chapter, and mine actually just cuts it out as like issues. So okay, yeah, and I see what yours has done. So basically that's just like a black and whited version of the.
It's when after Roland completes his test and he's got his first gun.
Yeah.
So it takes a part of the book, puts it in black and white, and makes it the chapter heading.
Okay, and mine just has the issues and cuts it up as though it's you could tell which issue is which, and it has like the intro page, with like the credits and stuff like that for everyone. Does yours have that as well? Does it have that on every chapter, as it were?
No, it did it all together.
Okay,
so it's got all of them.
It doesn't change during the course of this, which is awesome. But yeah, it is one of those ones like mine literally is just like, especially with it being digital, like literally it could just be that all the individual comics are just put together in one file, basically, is basically the way mine reads versus yours having it a little bit more polished up. But yeah, I love the cover image. It's a really good one as well. I feel like a lot of the images from this comic is stuff that's fairly influential to me. I mean, this is like the first first images in a lot of ways. I mean, I know we have like the illustrations in the books, and I do want to like make it clear from the start is that anything that like I say about the image, like the work here, is not to disparage what's in the novels, because I love those things too. But I feel like there's just an extra like goodness to what we have here, and there's
the thing with the images in the novels that they're not always highly detailed. They're not a comic, you know.
Yeah,
they're an artist's interpretation of what is happening, and sometimes it's like incredibly detailed. The one that pops to my head instantly, especially from Gunslinger, is Under the Mountains, where Roland's pulling Jake and blasting a slow mutant and everything like that. But then you get into like some of the ones, like one of the ones that sticks out to me as being less detailed is you get kind of a blurry picture of Roland on the beach after he's lost his fingers.
Yeah,
it's just kind of like a blurry picture in Drawing to the Three. So different artists, different interpretations, and everything like that. Yeah. I feel this is way more detailed, which is why it's not a slam on the book stuff. It's just, it's two different beasts. Is what
absolutely. It is. And I just know that in general, like even when I talk to people, and I fall into it too, to where when comparisons start to happen, like you have to put one down to raise yours up, and I never want to get into that. And I just want to make it clear up front that as much as I gush over the artwork here, it has no ill intent towards the novelization stuff that's in there, because those actually are our first images, I guess, you know, and in a lot of ways. But for me, like the second I saw the artwork on this, like it defined what I saw in my head. And in some cases I still do see in my head as well, and we'll get into that as we go here. But yeah, I love the image on the cover too. What I love about it too is that it's like shadowy as well. It's not, you know, it's not as like detailed as like this one that we got up on the screen here of you know, Roland and the buzzard, but we have it's just so much more shadowed stuff. I'm not really a fan of the tower on there though. Not really a fan of that design. Like there's so many different tower designs, but that one is one I'm not a fan of personally, but the Roland is incredible. And then so that's I love that image. It's just awesome, and I feel like it's just a good introduction. And I know I will say I'm biased. It's kind of hard to remove myself from the Dark Tower fandom and know whether this image would be striking enough for me to pick it up in the store if I wasn't a Dark Tower fan. I feel like it would be though, as like one that's a fan of westerns and stuff. But I will say my bias is fully there because I am a Dark Tower fan, and I can't remove that seed from my mind to know whether it would draw me in. But I love westerns, so chances are I would probably still grab it. So what else? What other? I guess overall, like just like more broad strokes before we get into like the nitty gritty. Like what did you think? So how? I think we both decided to read the first few and just kind of see what the conversation. We do the same thing in the book clubs. We read sometimes more well in advance what we ever get to in that episode, because we want to be prepared just in case the conversation speeds through quicker than we expected it to. So what did you think overall?
Of the
just what you've read, what you've seen, like you know, you have some experience now with Batman comics and stuff, but like how do you feel about just overall about the Dark Tower comics with what exposure you've had now?
I like it a lot. I really do. I like one of the nice things about having it on this my wife's Kindle that I have it on is what I have here is a zoom in option. So what it does is if I go panel by panel, and I'm kind of showing Tad this as we go, is like. So right here, it's kind of hard to read because it's only it's one of the smaller Kindles.
Yeah.
What I do is it clicks on it,
and it shows you frame by frame. Yeah.
And then it's kind of like a swipe, and it goes to the
next frame.
To the next frame, and it focuses on. It's almost like it feels cinematic almost, because like this frame here is where Roland's stepping down onto the bones, and it's the finish of the men in black fled across the desert, the gunslinger followed, and it shows him crushing the skeleton of the creature that the vultures were feasting on. I love that aspect of it. Reading it this way is a lot more. It feels very cinematic to me, which I love.
Yeah.
And then this one here, I loved this part. We need to make sure to come back to that. But overall, the tone of it feels like Dark Tower.
Yeah. Tone, artwork, dialogue. I mean, just everything about it. Is there like I guess I'm just looking for like for now, and then we'll get into some more detailed stuff. But I'm just talking like overall. What did you think? Because I mean. Again, I would say you're still relatively new to comic books, but I'm just curious what you think in terms of like how is it to experience this story that you know fairly well now from a different angle.
Yeah, It's really nice to put a visual aspect to a lot of stuff that I have in my head, like you were talking about. Roland's image is probably going to change for me. Some of the other stuff, maybe not so much. I have an image in my head of Court, and this one didn't seem like it was going to override it at all. But some of the other stuff in it, I know, like we were talking about, we read a little bit further than maybe just like the first issue or something like that. All I know is that the Roy Dupree from Aegis is definitely
into the second and third issue.
Yeah, he is definitely going to replace the one that I had in my head. that one jumped out at me, like vividly jumped out at me.
Right?
DePape?
Yeah.
DePape, is that how you say it?
Yeah, I think it is.
I thought it was Dupree. But anyway, Roy with the spectacles.
Yeah.
It is forever changed in my head now.
You know what he looks like to me in the comic?
What?
Is that Weasley kid from Tombstone.
Yeah.
The one that like derides them, like, oh, those men you killed are my friends.
The deputy.
Yeah.
There's the sheriff's deputy that's like a little bit more sophisticated.
Yeah.
Where he like enjoys the theater and everything like that. He really enjoyed that actor's performance.
It reminded me of that guy. Like if you could give me a time machine and go back and grab that dude from that time in the early 90s and they filmed Tombstone.
That'd be Roy.
That'd be him if I'm going by the comic illustrations.
The image, yeah.
Yeah. And Chris says, I'm not sure what my image of Roland was pre-movie, but Idris Elba works better for me than the cover of the Gunslinger Born. Now, I will say, I'll just take that as my segue into, as we talk about this on the whole, I'd say probably I probably had some of those early images from the novel because that's all we had at the time, was my first images of him as, to a small extent, because I will say, for the most part, no, it was Sergio Leone's Man with No Name series, Clint Eastwood.
Yeah.
That was just that. I'm like, every time I'd see the images, I'm like, okay, I kind of whatever. And sometimes those things would sneak in a little bit, but no, it was always Clint Eastwood. When the comics came out, it helped me kind of like, I think that merged in more, and maybe it became a little bit less Clint Eastwood and more the comic. But I will say 100% now that I'm looks like Magnus is saying that dude from 90210. I don't know. I honestly, looking at him in Tombstone, I've never seen 90210, but looking at the dude from Tombstone, it probably is. He looks like someone that'd be in a show like that.
I'm pretty sure it was him.
Yeah. But no, yeah. So when it comes to Roland, Idris has taken a huge spot to where like now the last last few times I've read this series, you're read into the series, not all the way through.
Right.
Idris is still in my mind heavily because I just feel like I will say I'm an unabashed fan of Idris, and I have been for a long time now.
Yeah.
But yeah, I agree with Chris. I still think like right now, if I was to open up any portion of the books and start reading tonight after we're done recording, I fully believe that my mind would it would be Idris, and then everything, Clint Eastwood and this and the ones from the novel itself would all be fairly low down the list in terms of like maybe they would crop up every once in a while. But overall, I mean, Idris is still Roland to me. So, but and that's not to like spur people that are more like not a fan of it. It's just the truth of what it is in my mind. So
yeah, me, I've always stuck with the classic stuff I've seen from my first reading of Gunslinger, which is the artwork in that one has always stuck with me. I mean, even times in theaters watching Dark Tower, and the couple times I've watched it outside of theaters, still parts of me go back to that image, even with Idris on screen.
Yeah.
So here it's a little bit closer to that than Idris.
Yeah.
And Clint Eastwood as well. Like you were saying, it's based off of Sergio Leone's and the spaghetti westerns and everything like that. And I love those spaghetti westerns. I watched them a lot.
Yeah.
And so part of me loves Idris. I respect him as an actor. I think he did a fantastic job as Roland and everything. But I will always have that first image from Gunslinger stuck in my head as Roland.
Yeah.
Even this one just feels just slightly off for me.
And that's fine. I think that's one of those personal things. We're all going to come at it differently for sure. But yeah, I think that in general, I almost find it interesting. Maybe we should, and I've actually been thinking, and I want to just throw it out there now. I know it's a little bit of a side tangent, which of course we never do.
Never.
But we have new people engaging us a bit. And what I want to do is go back and basically get a hard copy of that, the list of questions that we ask.
Oh, yeah.
And have that pinned on our social media or whatever to where people can answer questions. And maybe we could even make this as one of them, is like, now that we have three or four
five different
different images of Roland, like how do you picture him, and make that one of the things, and just because it would be an interesting thing to see where people fall on that kind of thing. But yeah, that's interesting. And yeah, Magnus said Jason Presley, and yeah, while Peter was talking, I googled that. That is indeed the guy. So if he's from 90210, then yeah, that's a kid from he plays that Weasley guy in Tombstone, and like it just kind of matches. Maybe it's mostly the spectacles, but I think even facial structure a little bit matches what they illustrated with DePape, and yeah, so that just kind of struck me as interesting.
Cody just said side tangent. No way.
Chris says I flipped through one of the comics in the library once. While the images were beautifully drawn, they really clashed with my mind's eye of what the characters looked like. And yeah, that's the kind of thing. Like I feel like we talked about for ages how the movie was going to have to have to fight against like people's preconceived notions, and that's just the nature of any movie that is based off of an existing book or whatever.
Yeah.
And I think the comics faced that same thing back in 2006 when they announced it, and as they did the work from 2006 to 2007 when they published it, that's something they were going to always have to fight against is, people have an image in their mind. I mean, and honestly, like I've talked about it before in older episodes especially, is in my mind's eye, Eddie for the longest time was Larry Underwood from the Stand miniseries.
Oh yeah, I forgot that you for some reason those two were always together.
Yeah.
For you.
So like that actor, like honestly, I see him. That's Eddie Dean to me. That's what he looked like in my mind's eye almost entirely for the longest time. And
yeah,
I mean, now after Breaking Bad entered my life and stuff, now it's changing up quite a bit.
Aaron Paul is Eddie Dean.
But yeah, no, that it's just one of those things. The mind eye is a tough thing. But some, like honestly, where you mentioned Court, for me, dude, Court, that's exactly what I pictured.
Is it?
It is. I just don't know. That's almost perfect. Like literally, I feel like it's like if they would have just sat me down as like the police profile drawer, like the people that profile, or what do you call that? Sketch artist. And I would have explained him. I honest to God think that it pretty much would have come out with this Marvel adaptation of Court, because it's like exactly what I pictured.
Do you want to know who ruined Court for me? Not ruined, but set Court in my mind's eye in concrete for what he should look like? It was you.
Yeah.
Do you remember when we did our casting like 2 years ago?
Yeah, Ray Winston.
That's right. That guy looks nothing like Ray Winston. Ray Winston is stuck in my head for Court.
And see, I always pictured Court, Ray Winston being done up to look as much like him in the comics as possible. But yeah, I see what you mean. And that's more of a realistic thing for sure.
See you, Magnus.
Yeah, it looks like Magnus has to go. Thanks for joining us. It's it's been fun. And yeah, now you crossed it over to where now I know that guy is from 90210.
Oh yeah, no, great.
It's all right. He was a weasel in Tombstone anyway. But yeah, no, so Court, that is that kind of way. So that's kind of some overarching things, but now we can kind of get into some of the blow by blow stuff a little bit. I loved the early on. There's a lot of mid-world speech roped into roped into the descriptions and stuff. We have a lot of it almost like the narrator is talking to you directly in some cases, and there's a lot of mid-world speech mixed in, which I think is is an awesome touch for.
See you, Chris.
Oh yeah, see you later, Chris. Thanks for joining us again.
And going along the lines of what you're talking about with the someone talking to us.
Yeah,
is this the narration one? Is the
even the one that's on the screen? There's a little bit.
It's literally the panel before that I'm talking about. It says, if the gunslinger looks familiar to you, well, that's as may be. Sorry, I swiped on accident. Echoes of him have been seen in tales spun across many other places in many other ways. Just as stories of a great flood, for instance, I love that reference, cut across the consciousness of all mankind, so too does the gunslinger. And so that I love that line that we all have him.
Yeah.
He's in stories across all the realms, basically, kind of thing. And that just makes me think, okay, so does that mean that the Sergio Leone ones is based off of the gunslinger? Or is the gunslinger based off of Sergio Leone? It kind of makes it really like, which came first, the chicken or the egg kind of thing?
Yeah, Dark Tower-ish. I will say that when I read that, the one that what came to mind instantly for me is the main character in most of Akira Kurosawa's Japanese movies. He does a lot of this. Like, he's basically the lead in almost every one of his movies. And like with him, like, he's the inspiration for like the those early westerns, like the Sergio Leone ones, are even inspired off of like these Kurosawa movies.
Magnificent Seven is almost directly based off of one of his films, isn't it?
Yeah, the Seven Samurai.
Yeah.
So like, but there's usually the one actor that always plays like that character, and honest to God, like it's just one of those things. Like when I read that panel, I was just like, oh, absolutely. Not only can I think of, Clint Eastwood or Kurt Russell or whoever else, cowboy, but also I think instantly of this samurai that's played in all these samurai movies.
Right.
That instantly he has that role and feel to him. He, it is like that universal nature of, I don't know, it's like the whole idea of like the hero of 1,000 faces with, like the Lucas read into a lot for Star Wars, where he's just like, if you look at a lot of these like legends, they have very similar blow by blow things. Like it's Joseph Campbell's like, the author that synopsized that, where it's like you could basically take this boiled down version of these stories and you end up finding them throughout biblical things, Greek mythology, and like all these throughout. I mean, Chinese literature. Like there's these natural things. I feel like Roland is not necessarily, he doesn't fit into that a lot, but in some aspects he definitely does. And I feel like there's just an element to him that's just,
there was
universal.
A formula that someone put out there comparing like Star Wars, Lord of the Rings, Harry Potter, some of the most epic tales, saying you take a character, you have a tragic loss early in life and everything like that, and then you have where they have to go to a world that they don't understand, or they're introduced to something that they're new to and everything like that. And I got looking at it and I'm like, okay, I could see how Dark Tower kind of fits this, but that just goes to Stephen King, break the mold and everything like that. But when it comes to Roland's character and everything like that, it's almost like the quartet is the one character, because we always don't just deal with Roland being the fish out of water. We see Eddie and Jake and Susanna and even Oi dealing with stuff throughout the series where they're the ones that have to deal with, wait, what's the custom? I mean, there's the one that always comes to my mind. It's the river crossing with is it Aunt Talia that she goes by?
I think so, yeah.
Where Susanna, thanks her, and he's like, no, that's for a man.
No, it's the other way around.
It's the other way around.
She learns it there, and then she does it to Blaine.
Yeah, and Blaine says, I'm not a woman.
Yeah, for sure.
Stuff like that, that always sticks with me, that because the big comparison that I have always seen is the Star Wars and Harry Potter one.
Yeah.
You take someone who's put into an extreme situation, and instead of having one character, King gives us 4.
Yeah.
4 or 5 if you want to count Oi. I mean, I know you don't because you hate him.
Of course, that makes its way in, of course, that the slander. But yeah, no, I think that it's just an awesome. I love and I love that. Like, what I love about the Gunslinger, though, in a lot of ways, is the fact though that he is so much different than these normal things. I mean, like the fact that he's like such a bastard or a prick, whatever you want to call him. Like the dude that will let a kid die and that kind of stuff. Like, that's not something you're going to see in your average mythology and stuff like that.
No.
But I think that's what makes me love Roland so much is that he is that guy, and he will do horrible things to the people that he proclaims to love, so long as it gets him to his goal. Like I don't know, a story like that generally probably wouldn't have sold in a large part of history, because that's just not a likable or a character you can get behind.
We talked about it with the film and everything like that, where we were the early stages of the film being announced and everything like that. Like, are they going to do the Gunslinger? If so, how are they going to handle Toll? Because we've talked about this several times. How can you have a main character slaughter men, women, and children?
Yeah,
even if it's into self-defense and everything like that, it seems like a main character who's supposed to be the hero in the story slaughtering men, women, and children is not going to go over well with an audience, period.
Yeah.
I mean, we talked about the speculation that the ending of the Dark Tower movie was actually changed because initially Roland just shoots Jake, and that's the go, then there are other worlds than these.
Yeah.
Boom, through the portal, and Jake dies, and there goes the machine.
Test audiences didn't like it.
Test audiences didn't like it. We talked about it then, too. Imagine him killing an entire town on screen. Not only that, he does some deplorable things throughout the series.
Yeah.
Which is just one of the reasons why a lot of people have a hard time with him, and a lot of people latch onto the other characters, mainly being you latch on to Randall Flagg, which I can never understand because he does way more deplorable things than Roland. But like me, I latched on to Eddie.
Yeah.
Other people have Jake and several. Wait, have we ever had anyone say Susanna?
I think she gets mentioned, but probably never in like the one spot.
The one spot.
I think that's generally either going to be Roland or Eddie is the ones that And Jake.
I see a lot of Jakes.
Those I think those three take up the majority of who people generally bring up as their favorites. Outside of that, you don't see as much. I mean, I think everyone talks about their love for Oi, but never necessarily saying like he's their favorite character, but just that, he's beloved. Like, not, it's a different kind of thing. And I feel like Susanna. I mean, I can't recall, but if somebody has said that, I apologize for forgetting. But yeah, it's definitely.
But
tough.
with Tad's memory, he's always forgiven.
Yeah. And then Ben says he pictured Court as Vincent D'Onofrio from Kingpin as Kingpin in Daredevil. Yeah. I think that's a really good a good pick for sure as well. That was definitely years past me seeing it, but I never made that connection in my mind, or from reading the books. Daredevil came out much later, but I never made that connection in my mind. But now that he said that, I actually could see what he's saying, and that'd be a good one too for sure. Because he was great in that, and he's a great actor. All in all, every time he shows up, he's something different for sure. And then after we have this double pager that's up on the screen currently with Roland and just some awesome art, whether that takes place as like your Roland or not, I feel like you could definitely admit that it's just a great piece of art for sure. Very stunningly done. The next image up is a flashback. Now we jump into the flashback mode, but unlike book one that jumps back into some lesser flashbacks, a few weeks before, whatever it might be. Here we're jumping all the way back to book 4 era stuff, which is young Roland. And so here we have a double pager, and we have Roland and David, and you also get our first images of Cuthbert and Alan. I also put it as a note, which I know we already touched on a little bit, is I said until Idris is cast, this is how I pictured Roland when reading book 4, and honestly still up until Roland's casting, that put me through a lot of confusion, because whereas the adult Roland didn't necessarily fully take form in my mind as my primary Roland, the young Roland absolutely has always been, ever since this comic came out, has been this animation from this here. When Idris got cast, that's where it was just like, well, damn.
Well, now what?
And honestly, I think like last time, I think I was in the middle of book 4 when I after they announced the casting, and I want to say honestly, I was picturing Michael B. Jordan. He's obviously an adult now, but at one point he was just a young kid in The Wire, and I picture him probably there, but maybe adding a couple years on him, and there was kind of what I was picturing in my head.
Just a couple years before he did Creed, right?
Yeah, because the Wire's there like 2099 to 2003 ish, somewhere in that realm, and he was probably like 12 to 14, and he definitely looked young. He was portraying a young kid and stuff. So I probably would have added a couple years to him, but that's kind of what I did just because he's a great actor. So, and I also love in this image that Alan has the rounder face that is described in the book. This image of Roland and his younger quartet. Just because that is one of the more defining features physically that we're given is the round face of Alan. It's kind of cool to see that. And then I think the next, as we move on a little bit further, is we end up getting intros to all of them as well. But then we also get our first new character to the comic books that is not in the books at all, and that is Thomas Whitman.
Yep.
So created for the comics, fairly new. We also see Jamie DeCurry. He is mentioned in the novels, sparsely, but I feel like
Jamie's the one that gets. Is Jamie the one, or is it Alan that gets killed by the Sentry at Jericho Hill?
No, it's Jamie.
It's Jamie.
Yeah.
But
I believe that by and large we don't get a lot from him. I feel like if you were to go look at like his Wikipedia page, I would bet you a lot of his stuff comes from the comics. Though I know he gets a lot of coverage in the comics, so I feel like we're going to see a lot more of him as we go on. And as I said earlier, Court illustrated is exactly as I imagined him. And I also love the tag as we go a little bit further. We're not privy to Roland's inner mind, and for that we say thank you, since it would likely frighten the piss out of you.
Yeah,
that's definitely a good one. But what do you got? What other thoughts do you have here on?
I loved his name is Court, his word is law.
Yeah.
It goes back to, I think we talked about this a little bit in Gunslinger book club, so I'll bring it up here, is that it always baffled me the first couple times I read through it and saw this man who basically was slapping around nobility's kids. It just kind of like, it throws me for a loop, because it's not what you're used to, especially with like, you picture like a prince or like, like dukes and everything like that in the English history and everything like that. Yeah. And I couldn't picture a teacher, Merlin-esque style teacher smacking around Arthur's son,
Yeah.
or Lancelot's son, or Galahad's son, or someone like that.
Yeah.
Very reminiscent. We've always pulled Knights of L, Arthur L, King Arthur and everything like that.
Yeah.
So it always throws me with court, and we get one right here with the hawks and everything like that. He absolutely kicks. He like takes his spear and like chest checks, and it goes back to like me thinking like hockey, because I'm a hockey fan. Just checks Alan and Cuthbert to the ground. And it always catches me off guard how brutal he is to these boys and everything like that.
Yeah.
And then like seeing the adaptation they did to his stick, I don't think it had a blade in the books.
I don't think, no, that's not how I pictured it. I
thought it had a ball on one end that he used for like a club.
Oh.
And then on the other end, I can't remember what it was, but I don't think that it was a blade.
And like honestly, even if it mentions like the balls, I didn't even picture that. I honestly always just pictured it with like a bow staff type thing.
Yeah,
like that's just me. And just the way my mind works. Even if the book's telling me something different, sometimes your mind may paint a different picture. And I always picture him just a straight bow staff. I don't know why.
That's that. I do the same thing with the bow staff. But that's just because I was a Turtles fan growing up. So I just pictured Donatello. And whenever someone says staff, that's what I picture is Donatello's staff.
Oh, man. And then, of course, here a little bit further, we get the introduction to the hero of the story, Martin.
Boo! Hashtag Tide is terrible.
And I maybe I'm biased, but I will say that the illustration of him has a Gary Oldman tinge to it.
It does, doesn't it? And this is where you get that line. We're not privy to Roland's inner mind, and for that we say thank you, since it would most likely frighten the piss out of you.
Yeah. Yeah. And then like it's just funny overall as we go through like Court's lesson, and then we go into the introduction of Gabrielle and Martin. We're basically taking dialogue and story beats straight from the novel, and
just about yeah.
It's fairly good at keeping to the source material. It isn't doing a lot of coloring outside the lines. I feel like the versus new story beats as of now. I mean, of course, there's going to be different as we move forward throughout the series, the comic series. But as we're talking now, I would say the biggest thing that this is putting forward is more of the visualization of things versus new story beats.
So since we're right here, I always wanted to ask you, and I think I didn't do it because it had potential for spoiler in the book club. Gabrielle's here with Martin, and obviously we know what's going on and everything.
The book makes it pretty clear, doesn't it?
Well, also here, I mean, talking about the love bite and everything like that. In the book, she's wearing a sheer shirt. In this one, she's completely naked.
Yeah.
Do you believe that Martin bewitched her, or do you believe that he seduced her?
I think it's a seduction.
It's a seduction?
Yeah. Because I feel like, I don't know. Like, I feel like that adds to the tragedy. I feel like it kind of gets into that whole, like, thing of like, if it was just like some spell, then it isn't as much of a betrayal.
Mm-hmm. That's where I always went.
I feel like it robs some of the riches from. Mm-hmm. I look at it from like, as a like story. Like if I was telling the story, I would want it to be that she just fell in love with him and she's cheating on her husband with him, because that's juicier. That adds more to like Roland's drive to finding the Men in Black and killing the Men in Black, and that has more, like, I don't know, it does more for the character on I guess on both sides, both Roland and Flag. It does more for them in my mind, versus if it was just a spell, then it turns into a thing where it's just like, oh well, she's not really.
See, that's where I thought that it was a little bit more interesting, because then it's almost tantamount to Roland's mother's being raped, which is why he holds a certain regard for her. Like he keeps her at an arm's distance. Like, you're obviously, screwing behind my father's back and everything like that. And he holds this animosity towards her.
Yeah.
And we see that in just a couple, after his battle with Court, when he, is that issue 2? I think that might be part 2.
It might. Yeah.
But,
I think it might be.
But the big thing for me is that's more tantamount to Martin is raping his mother, which is where like a huge anger comes for Martin and not for Gabrielle. He has animosity towards her, but that's where I kind of like this version of it versus the book really makes me wonder if it's not a combination of the two, where maybe it was, it started with a spell and then it turned into, maybe a little bit of Stockholm syndrome kind of thing. Steven's always gone. He's off on these gunslinger missions and everything like that. there's a warm body here and Martin and everything like that. But it always kind of confused me at first. Like, what is she doing? And the big part that confused me is why would Steven not do anything about it?
Yeah. I think it's one of those things. It's playing castles in terms of like whatever. Now, one question I'd throw at you, just towards what you're saying there, is why her being willing is maybe the better thing. Is ultimately, if that were the case, would this not be potentially Roland's biggest betrayal early in his life, and would that not then be potentially what builds the betrayal in him that we'll find throughout the rest of the series? You know what I mean?
True.
Like, because like this is, I mean, you're not talking necessarily like a betrayal in the cradle, but you may as well be. I mean, you're talking.
He's 14 years old.
Yeah, he's a boy.
Yeah.
You know? So to be betrayed in that fashion, and I mean, he'll find out a little bit later that this has been going on for a couple of years. So like going back to like, you know, him at what, 11 or 12.
Steven says, I have known for 2 years, but how long has it been going on?
Yeah. So it's one of those things like I almost wonder in terms of like, this is a very huge, I mean, we know as book fans that there's some very big moments that are going to be coming for Roland during the course of this comic series, because we know from the books that are defining. And I feel like this might be that first defining thing that happened to him. You know, because like his trial or his like, you know, becoming a gunslinger is a big one, but it all stems from this and that betrayal and that anger, like whatever it might be. I just feel like I wonder, is that like a foundation to the character that will eventually betray Jake, betray Eddie, betray Susanna, betray Oy, betray whoever? You know, he'll betray everyone. You know, it's
also setting the groundwork for the person who's going to choose his duty over Susan.
Yeah,
in Magus, which is going to happen in this comic series.
Which I almost feel that's the cementing in a lot of ways of
that's where it's the final lever switch, and now he's rolling.
Yeah, and I feel like the only other thing you have is the killing of his mother, but since that's another like since that has like the magical element of like being tricked, that almost like adds more towards the hatred of the Man in Black, more than being a character solidifier in my mind. That's what I'm saying. I feel like if you got like cement that's wet, I feel like solidified with the death of Susan, you know, and potentially even looking into the glass and seeing it. I feel like that's like the thing that cements him, makes him 100% who he's going to be. And I think that like all the him killing his mom, and I don't want this to sound crass or like that it's under like downplaying it, but I feel like that's nothing but seasoning. You know, that's nothing but maybe the paint job on the cement after it dries. Like, yeah, it adds something to him, but it's not necessarily in the stone part of his character, because I feel like he had already established that, you know, through Susan's death, and I feel like that goes back to
not only Susan's death, but the betrayal of his mother, like you're talking about.
Yeah.
Behind
and the betrayal,
his father's back,
because then what this follows upon before right after this we're going to see is Steven telling me new, and this doesn't portray it as much, but the novels do, about, you know, Roland upsells how much that was impactful. You know, like these few words that completely destroyed me. You know, I've known for 2 years, like that, because now he's been not only been betrayed by his mom, but now he's been betrayed by his dad.
Also, do you think part of it is where he starts to shut down emotionally right there, when his father tells him that I've known for 2 years, and starts to realize that there are more things more important than the love of your life or the people, your quartet, maybe, where at that point, the thought is planted in his mind where, oh, Steven had a duty. Yeah. If he had stopped this 2 years ago when it had happened, some good might not have happened. He's laid false trails with Martin. He's used him against his master and everything like that.
I think for sure. I almost feel like that's a momentary thing, though. Like the moment he says, I've known for 2 years, I feel like that's the moment of betrayal. But then as the rest of that scene unfolds and he tells him the rest, and like it becomes more softer towards him, I feel like that's the moment when what you're talking about happens.
Where Roland starts to think in that frame of mind of, oh, I got to stop thinking about me and mine. I got to think about the duty, and his duty becomes in Magus to finding the Dark Tower.
Yeah,
which is why he's able to choose to go after Farson's men instead of going back and saving Susan.
Yeah, exactly.
The Dark Tower would be a very different story if he had gone back and saved Susan.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, the tower would have fallen, because I don't think that Roland wouldn't be a gunslinger.
It's what we talk about with Roland's redemption. would that have saved Roland?
I think it would have for sure, but in the same way, like, yeah, that's where he gets to the whole thing of like he almost has the right time he has to turn from the tower, and that definitely wouldn't have been it because you know, like how much different would have gone if he hadn't had, because like I feel like he would have literally given up the whole gunslinger thing,
but here's the
never
question.
taken up his father's guns, and then just been with Susan until until she died, and maybe he gets killed with her as well. So
it's potentially though that you could make the argument that Roland, if he saved Susan and it changed him, could he have saved Gilead and stopped the tower from falling that way?
I'm not sure. I feel like there's an inevitability to the victory of Farson. I feel like it's one of those things where
didn't Roland say that? You actually just sparked something in my head. Didn't Roland say that Gilead was bleeding out?
Yeah,
or something like, or was diseased or bleeding out or something like that.
Yeah,
and that while the victory in May just stemmed the flow for a little bit, they were still bleeding or something like that.
Yeah. I believe, yeah, I'm pretty sure that that's the case. And it's just one of those things. That's the way I've always interpreted it through what we've had, is that Gilead was doomed. It was just a matter of how much fight it put out before it was snuffed out type thing. And that's the way I've always interpreted it in my mind, to where, no, I don't think there's anything Roland could have done, period, to turn that tide. That was too much. It was a tidal wave. It was a tsunami coming towards him. You know, like all he could do is run and maybe prolong his life a little, but no, he's not going to, you know,
he's not going to be able to stop the wave hitting.
No. So that's why I feel like his aim is at the tower, and it's almost like it was never to save Gilead ever. Like that, I don't feel like it was ever even his thought, you know, to being his mission. I feel like he was always instantly knowledgeable of the fact that the tower was the most important thing, and that's because that's where some difference could have been made. It's still potentially versus Gilead. I feel like he almost came along in the game too late. You know, like he
that it's like putting someone into a football game when they're down 35 points with 3 minutes left in the fourth. Like, what can you do?
Yeah.
Okay, well, you can kind of make it respectable and do your part, but you're not going to be able to save it.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. And actually, it is like so the trial is this issue. Because then he goes, because that's and like ultimately what we know from the story is that ultimately Roland's being manipulated to basically taking on his trial too early, failing and being sent west, because if Flag can get rid of Roland, he's in a better position. But of course, Cost, you know, steps in the way and meddles in Flag's perfect plans, and Roland
just stop it.
And Roland passes his test, and this is one of those things that, like, for me to see this is something else, because I feel like if nothing else, comic books are brilliant at action. Just to watch, you know, the things that, and like, be it from the moment he's kicking in the door of Court's place and like the showdown, and like honestly, it's like, it's one of those ones I don't bring up a lot, but it is some of my favorite stuff in the book is Court stuff. I know I've talked about Court being my favorite, but like even like this, like when he's trying to like counsel him, like, you know, like he's almost giving him more options than he should. You know what I mean? Like it should be like because I feel like there's like, you get the sense that a lot of what they're saying and what's being spoken is very I'm blanking on the word, ritualistic. There's a lot of ritual involved, and it's one of those like where thousands of years it feels like has built into all of these rituals. And I feel like the ritual is the moment that you challenge him, it's on. But I feel like Court is almost breaking some of those rituals to like give Roland a few outs where it's like, come on, dude, you're too young.
Yeah,
come on, man.
It's the start of the ritual that I always see. What you're talking about is, teach me no more, bondsman, today I teach you.
Yeah.
It's like once that is spoken, that's it. It's done. Roland has to face Court now.
Yeah.
And then even like a panel later, he's like, but Stephen Deschain is Lord of Gilead and twice the man you are. And why not wait half again as long? Well, and then Roland doesn't reply.
Yeah, he's giving him an out.
Not only there, he's giving him an out, but if you go forward a couple pages to where they're doing again, you're talking ritual. It's have you come here for a serious purpose, boy? And he does I've come for a serious purpose and everything like that. And then, what is your weapon? My weapon is David. And it just kind of shows Court is confused by this. And he goes, huh. last chance to cry off, boy. Last chance to surrender, old man. You know, it's kind of like,
yeah.
Like, he even gives him another out. Like, right before they start fighting, he still gives him another out. It's like,
and I
know you're going to fail. I have to try and save you.
Yeah, and I feel like it's one of those things that, like, that like, it's not in the text that I recall that he shouldn't be giving him those outs, but I get the impression.
Oh, it always felt that way.
Yeah. It feels like it's one of those things that, like, this isn't normal. Like, the second that, you know, Cuthbert says that line, he's not getting, you know, 1, 2, 3 chances to change his mind. You know, same with Alan or whoever else. Like, I just don't feel that's going to happen. So I feel like this is something special, and I feel like maybe it's even because Court knows more than he lets on, and maybe he even sees some of the manipulation, and he knows what's happening.
He probably knows. I mean, he's not stupid. I mean, Court's a smart guy.
Yeah.
I honestly believed that he knew what was going on. I think that he even kind of hints at it in the book a little bit, if I remember right. It's been a little bit since we've read Gunslinger. But in this one, he doesn't, you know, iterate at it at all. But he just tries so hard to keep Roland from doing this.
Yeah.
Which makes me think that he knew. Is because Stephen, you know, probably warned Court, hey, you know what? We got to watch out for Roland. If Roland finds out about this, we got to make sure we keep him from going through the test.
Yeah. And that's one of those things where it's just like, man, I would love like a Game of Thrones type show of this, and I'm hoping the show that we're getting will be something like, because I almost feel like I'm hoping that they fill in more gaps, and I want to see more of Stephen. I want to see more of Court. I want to see more of the inner workings of Gilead.
Yeah,
you know, even if you're somewhat apocryphal and it's not necessarily quote canon in terms of like what Stephen King wrote, but I want to see that stuff added in because I want to know more about it, and I would love to see like us be revealed that Court has been in the inner council of Stephen. You know what I mean? And that he's
got his gunslingers.
Yeah.
But he's also got his Merlin kind of thing. You know, like Arthur will always talk to his Knights of the Round Table and everything like that and all the old mythology. But if something's troubling him and he doesn't want to go to his knights with it yet, who does he talk to?
Yeah.
That's what I picture Court as too.
And I mean, I think like that Martin is supposed to be like the Merlin character, but what I always picture with Court is like, I always hear like in the realm of sports that like, you know, if a coach wants to know about a player, don't talk to his coaches or his assistant coaches. Go talk to like the equipment manager.
Yeah.
You know, because that's the dude that really knows these players. He sees them in the locker room. He's a fly on the wall. You know, people don't think about him, but he's there, and he knows a lot more about a lot of this stuff than maybe, you know, but whereas like a coach might be trying to sales pitch a player that he's coaching because it ups his credentials if, you know, that player goes to whatever it might be. So I've heard that a lot of different times in a lot of different sports where it's like, and I feel like that's what Court in my mind, not necessarily the Merlin as much as like he's like the equipment manager.
Yeah,
like
he's the boy that Arthur came up with. That was Arthur was the what is the squire where he's in training, and then the boy is the blacksmithing son, and they're kind of friends. He has the other side of the tracks kind of thing, which is what you get with Court here too, where Roland says, "I'll let the brothels know you're not coming." Yeah. Imagine the kind of gossip that he probably hears.
Oh yeah,
going through there and from the whores and everything like that,
and even from the kids.
It's true.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things, like, how often do you read online where, like, you read these things where teachers are asked questions and they talk about the stuff their kids say about their parents?
Yeah.
You know? I mean, you know, of course you think of some horrible stuff, but at the same time it can also be hilarious things that, like, oh, man, the kid just said that. Like,
yeah.
So
wasn't there a story about a parent getting ousted as being they were growing pot because their kid bragged about it at school?
Yeah. Yeah,
they went and found this huge pot farm in their garage or something like that. It's just like, oh my gosh, kid.
Yeah. Ben in the chat says, I know we want Jericho Hill as a new book, but what about Tales of the Gunslingers type thing with young Stephen and previous generations and their adventures? 100%.
He's said that before.
I will sign up. I will even say to hell with Jericho Hill. Write me that book instead.
How dare you?
I'm sorry, man.
How dare you, sir?
I would be way more, because I'm into that kind of stuff. I love like that, like whenever you get into like either sci-fi, fantasy, whatever it might be, I want to know more about the deeper realms and the world building, the larger mythology stuff versus like whatever. And honestly, like I probably said this idea before because I feel like it's not a new idea, but go Godfather 2 style. Go Tales of the Gunslingers cross-cutting with the fall of Jericho Hill. Yeah, like see Steve.
That was in perfect stereo.
See Stephen coming up as a gunslinger at the same time you see Roland. You know what I mean? Both of them earning their bones. The same way you see Michael and Vito in Godfather 2. Yep. You know, do that for King. Just cross-cut them both. But I would love to see that because, yeah, there's nothing more I want to see than like that inner working. And we get some of it here as they're sent off in the next issue, I believe.
It is the next issue. It ends with I just peeked ahead to see where we ended. Issue 1 ends with Stephen confronting Roland in the whorehouse.
Yeah. So I will say that going through reading this, Court yielding is still a fist bump moment for me, or a fist pump. You know what I mean? Like, just kind of one of those, yeah, you know, even though I love Court. It's just one of those things that, like, no matter how many times I read it, or in this case now I'm, like, reading comic-wise to, like, see more of it, it's just a fist pump moment. I just feel like it's one of those, like, yeah, like,
it's
moments.
definitely someone beating the odds, because, I mean, obviously this was the plan all along, is to trick him into getting his guns early so you could kill him easier.
Yeah.
You know, no one's going to kill a boy or go after the boys, and you know, when they're protected in the inner circle. But now that he's a gunslinger, you know, it's kind of like he's free game and everything like that. He's fair game is what I should say.
Yeah.
But here with this is the one you're talking about, right? This panel?
Yeah. Because where he finally yields, yeah.
Yeah. I yield gunslinger, I yield smiling. I always love that line, and that's straight out of the book.
Yeah. So much of this is, and I feel like that's like, you know, some might just go, oh, well, that's kind of like lazy, but like, no, sorry. Like, the way the books are, like, that's what I want.
And this goes back to our discussion about the movie that we had last year, or maybe it was the beginning of this year, our first roundtable, where you brought up that point. Someone wrote us an email saying that, you know, this is one of the reasons why we had a hard time swallowing the film, more so than, like, me and you didn't necessarily have this, but as soon as it was pointed out to us, it's like, they kind of ignored this aspect of the books.
Yeah.
Where it's okay to take some of it and put it into it. And
Yeah.
that's what you're talking about here, is that I yield smiling. That you're right. A lot of people could be like, well, that's just lazy. That's straight out of the book. Make it your own. Well, the problem is that if you make it your own, you change it from avid fans.
Yeah.
And everything like that. And that goes to where this is staying really true to the books. And I really like it, but I love that it's adding to it.
Yeah, it adds, and especially as we go on into the future here, even as we get outside of the Gunslinger Born and get into some of the later runs,
where it's stories that were never even mentioned in
the like
books.
Jericho Hill and stuff like that is covers, you know, like that stuff's not covered in the books as much as it is in this comic. So it'll be interesting to see as we get into that kind of stuff. But yeah, and like, you know, it's funny for me is because what when you say that, like, taking it straight from the books, like, it's funny because, like, me, I've never read, like, the Game of Thrones books, the Song of Ice and Fire books. I'm going to save those till after the show is done. Then I'll go through and read them. But I've noticed as I listen to podcasts or people that have read the books talk, where, like, you know, I'll be listening through as they go through episode by episode, and I'll get to, like, one where it's, oh, I love this line. And they mention, oh, yeah, that's the line. It's straight from the book. I'm like, oh, all right. Well, I guess the author's great because I love that line, you know? And it's just one of those, like, you'd almost be at a loss if you took the line away simply because it was in the book. You know, you're going to lose out on a good line. And I feel like that's the way it is this comic. Like, they're keeping a lot of stuff in there, which is great because they're getting a lot of cool lines that, you know, Stephen King wrote. I mean, why take away from that? Like, Stephen King wrote such a brilliant thing. Basically, all you're doing is you're repackaging it into a different form so that people can digest it differently. Because I know people that are like my stepdad. I don't know if he's read a book since high school. You know, he reads comic books, but he hasn't read a novel. That's just not him. My mom, she reads novels. That's where I think I got it from. But it's like there's some people that legitimately don't. I mean, I've talked to people, other friends, and even like people at work where it's just like they literally, oh yeah, I haven't read a book since high school. And even then, I mostly didn't read the books. I just kind of like went through and got what I needed to like pass tests. I'm just like, I don't get you, man. Like, I love reading. It's just such a fun like outlet for me. So it's hard, but there's a lot of people that don't. So this is a cool way to like repackage this story in a way that people will be able to like consume in a different way. And now you have new fans that
it definitely opens it up to a different type of audience. That's for sure.
Yeah. And I think like, so it like to close out this issue, I said, I put a note and I says, overall, the first issue is stunningly illustrated. It covers a story we know well, but we experience it in a new way rather than by word, whether it be spoken or written. We're now seeing it with more than our imagination. Even the film did not touch on this aspect. So even today, reading this, we are seeing it for the first time when reading this outside of our own imaginations. Like, I feel like that's kind of a huge thing too. Because like, for as iconic as this is for most of us Dark Tower fans, it's something that we have still not seen play out in the movie. We haven't, you know, so all we've seen it is either in our mind now, or now we've seen this illustration from these talented people. Yeah. And that's the only time we've seen like this huge element of the like this trial and stuff. So yeah,
I wanted to ask you a question about this to see if you remember. A couple panels after the trial, you see Roland confronted by Martin again. I just want to show you just so you remember which one.
Oh yeah,
that's not in the book, is it? He goes straight from getting his guns to the whorehouse, right?
That I recall, yes.
Okay.
I
couldn't remember, and I couldn't find my copy of Gunslinger to confirm my suspicion.
The problem is, would it be even being Gunslinger, or would it be in the beginning of book 4? That's the problem, is they parse out.
Oh, yeah.
They parse out the story so much where it's like there is no one spot to get this entire story. So it's one of those things that might even be that I'm not remembering it because it might be more in book 4 than book 1, which is the more recent one that I've read because of our book clubs. So no, that did strike me as like, I don't recall that, but I could very well be mistaken in that. Yeah. So what I'm trying to think, like, overall, are you excited? Because now this is the end of issue 1. Like when it comes to like the rest of this,
I wanted to ask your permission to finish it.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I didn't know if we were going to do parts because I asked you how far we were going potentially for this episode.
Yeah.
You said go through the first 3 chapters for me and the Amazon one, and I had to force myself to stop because when you said that, I was partway through number 4. And so I kind of pulled myself back, and I'm like, does he not want me to read ahead? So I didn't know.
Yeah, no.
So I had to get your permission.
I think it's one of those things, like, because like as we go on, and we'll go on to some regular roundtables and stuff, and then we'll eventually rope back into a roundtable that includes this stuff as well. I want to keep this semi-regular. Mm-hmm. You know, of course, like, we'll talk through it. So, but no, you don't necessarily have to be going through the first time. Then, if you want to go through and read the rest of Gunslinger Born, go ahead. I'd say. Yeah, and maybe even post on like the Facebook or whatever some of your thoughts and stuff on it as you go through for the first time. Because that happened to me a while back now. It's been a while since I read it for the first time. But...
See, that's why I didn't know if we wanted to save it for the show. I'm okay with that. I will do that for you guys.
Because I feel like just going through and dissecting it, just talking about like impressions and stuff, it's more like something that is what we're doing here versus like, you know, having Peter go gaga over it. So yeah, no, you're free to go ahead and read the rest of Gunslinger Born here. Now, I think that where we're at with time, I think we'll go ahead and
before we wrap up, there was one I wanted to talk about with you because it is just so impactful what they added to this.
Okay,
and that's one of the things I love about this.
That's exactly what I felt with this. Is like, let's talk about what's
one of the big things with this that I loved is the little details that they added. Like you already mentioned, they introduced a new character. I'm intrigued by him and everything like that. But here, it's the last panel. Let me zoom out so you can. It's after he's blown the gun out of Roland's hand.
Yeah.
And he says, "You have forgotten it's Stephen talking, sorry. You've forgotten the face of your father." And then it adds to that. Like that's in the first book he says that and everything like that.
Yeah.
But the narrator speaking to us said, "Powerful words those. They speak of shame, they speak of having behaved dishonorably. And when the words are uttered by one's own father, emerging from his own face, well, what else can one say, save that the words say true, and we say thank ye, sigh." And then they show it accurately. As soon as he says it, Roland just stops.
Yeah.
And it just goes to show, it really put more meaning behind the phrase, "You've forgotten the face of your father."
Yeah.
To me, always has kind of been like, "You've been a bad boy," slap on the hand kind of thing. This time, it really added depth to that phrase to me.
Yeah. Oh yeah, totally.
And I just wanted to see if did you always think of that phrase as something like really deep and meaningful?
I think I did, in terms of like, because like it's just one of those things. Again, it almost feels ritualistic,
right?
You know, and then like because it is like it's one of those things that like I will tend, if I feel like something's ritualistic, I'll probably tend to put more meaning into it, maybe even than it deserves, because that's just my way. You know, I'll take it to like the extreme and take it as like this like super big thing. So yeah, I think that's just my nature. So yeah, I've always interpreted it as being kind of what's portrayed here. So it wasn't as much of a reveal to me, but I find it interesting with like, you know, what Robin will do, you know, what she'll guide them to do as the writers and stuff, to potentially outline some of this stuff more, because you don't really, even in the novels, I don't think you ever really get that kind of explanation for it,
right?
And or whether we ever even get that added meaning to having that said to you by your own father, and what more that might mean, you know, is pretty big. So
that panel definitely impacted me a lot when I was reading through it. I was like, oh man, like, oh, when his father says it, it's like one of the worst things that could ever be said to him. Like, oh my gosh, like,
yeah,
I never thought about that.
Yeah.
You know?
Oh, yeah. and I'm not sure if I even thought of that aspect of it. I always felt that it was impactful, but I'm not sure if I ever really necessarily looked at it in terms of his own father saying it. But yeah, it's kind of a big deal. And yeah, so that's kind of a recap of issue 1 of Gunslinger Born. And we'll add these in as we go. I think we're going to have to like kind of alternate around because like basically in a lot of ways we've kept the news kind of short. I've left a few articles that we could have covered out to give us more time for this. And also we obviously dropped off our emails, which we don't want to do a lot because we love the emails. We still have a lot of emails to cover and we still want you guys to email. That's definitely always going to be a big part of the show. So that's why we're going to keep these looks at the comics a little bit more I don't want to say irregular, but
sparse.
Yeah, no? like they'll come and go. We'll every so often we'll bring him in, and maybe there'll be times that there's a little bit less news, and we could just dive into it almost from the beginning.
Yep.
But yeah, we definitely don't take this as a sign that like emails are in some way less important because they're not. We definitely want to hear from it, and so I'll even throw it out. Like I want to hear from you guys. If you guys have read the comics, if so, give me some thoughts on them. Just some basic thoughts. Some of the stuff we asked Peter. If you have any thoughts on, especially issue 1 of Gunslinger Born, send those to us through email or on social media. We'd love to hear it. And so we'll go ahead and get into the end of the show. But one other thing I want to say is just to remind everyone, we have one more episode of February, and then from there is where we might be going dark for March because I'm going to be having a surgery. So I'm not sure how that's going to look. I'm guessing that at least the first episode of March is probably not going to happen. So we just wanted to, and we'll warn you again next episode so you guys will know going into it. But most likely, yeah, you won't be hearing from us at the beginning of March. That's kind of planned. So we'll give you more warning on that as we get into next episode as well. But just to close up, if you guys want to subscribe to us, you can do that on iTunes, stream us on Stitcher. You can find the show notes on the actual notes in the podcasting app where you have our description of the episode. And if you want to engage with us between shows or be part of a show, the best ways to do that are
email us at darktowerpalaver@gmail.com. You can also find us on Facebook. It's facebook.com/darktowerpalaver. Give us a follow on the Twitter. It's at darktowerpod. That's at darktowerpod. We stream our live shows on YouTube. You can also check out old shows and see the slides and news articles that Tad has shown me. That's youtube.com/darktowerpalaver. And Tad, I'm just going to remind you one more time. Don't forget to find that tweet for next time.
Yeah, definitely do that. And also, somebody brought up, I'm forgetting where it was. Somebody brought up the idea of, it was Cody from Kansas, said we could do a YouTube for book club episodes for the live chat feature and just not publish it. You know what? I feel like a complete idiot for not thinking of that before, but we will do that. Next book club, we will do it live. Again, we will always have to reserve the right to not do them live, depending, because sometimes we do book clubs because something just isn't going to work out. We have to record something really oddball time-wise and then just kind of post it when we post it. But yeah, next time let's shoot for a live book club. That'll be fun to have people chatting along with us and letting us know, what's going on with the book clubs and have other inputs. That'd be kind of cool to have other people talking.
So also to remind you guys, with book clubs, we're at the, just in case if anyone hasn't listened to the last episode with book club, we're at the point where the van pulls up with Jack Andolini in it, where Eddie's on the side of the curb. The cab just dropped him off.
Yeah.
So the pizza truck, that's what it is. Pizza truck is pulling up to Eddie.
Yeah.
That's where we stopped last time. So if you want to read from there, we usually go about a chapter and a half. You would say it'd be safe, 2 chapters?
Somewhere in there, yeah.
Yeah.
Depending on what's in the chapter.
Not the little sub-chapters that King does, like 1, 2, 3, or anything like that, but actual chapters is usually about how much we go through.
Yeah.
So if you guys want to read through that, we're going to get to the Jack Andolini part.
Yeah, indeed.
Balazar.
Which is going to be great. So until next time, which next time will probably be another roundtable, I believe.
I thought you said book club.
No, I just said we're going to do...
Oh, the next book club is going to be live, but the next episode is not going to be a book club. Thank you for clarifying.
Yeah. If nothing really happens news-wise, in terms of whatever, we might change it up into a book club, but for now, let's pencil in a roundtable for next time, and until then, we say to you as we always do, long days and pleasant nights.
Long days and pleasant nights, folks.
Stop recording here. But yeah, it looks like Cody, actually I did send the poster, but it actually got sent back to me, so I'm actually I think I did something right. wrong and the UPS person did not catch it, so it just got returned to me recently. I was going to email you and let you know. So I am actually going as soon as we're done here back to the UPS store and sending it again. So it will be on its way. Sorry about that. I meant to email you and let you know about that when it came back to me earlier in the week, and just completely forgot with everything. I'm on a new schedule, so I work mornings now. So I'm like in bed at like 8 o'clock because I'm like an old person now. So
Tad's got to get his beauty sleep.
So yeah, Cody, it will be coming here in the next, within the next hour. I will be at UPS shipping it off. So sorry about the delay. And thanks everyone that joined us in the chat. It's been fun, and next time we'll either be we'll be doing it live one way or the other, whether it's a roundtable or a book club. So we will see you guys then here on the YouTubes.
See you guys.